A moment later he burst out the door, head swiveling, hunting for Connor. There was no sign of him. He summoned up the memory of finding Connor here before, the direction he had gone in that time, the alleyway he had chosen. One hand on his reforged sword, Indicate sprinted down the street, found the alley, and turned into it without pausing. His hunch was right. He could see Connor at the end of the alley, silhouetted in lantern light at an intersection. He was talking to another man. The man was armored head to toe in dark plate, his face masked by a closed helm with the narrowest of eye slits and a perforated vent tail. Those holes were the only things that suggested that a human being dwelt underneath the gleaming black metal. As Indicate raced down the alley towards Connor and his companion, this armored stranger suddenly drew a sword and thrust it through the old man's abdomen. Connor cried out and fell, his rag-covered legs buckling under him. Indicate sprinted closer. The armored man raised his sword to strike Connor in the head or neck. He intended to decapitate the old tramp. No! Indicate imagined the sword missing and innovated, drawing heat from the air. The sword struck stone rather than flesh, and the knight stumbled, momentarily off balance. A wave of frost shot down the alley and rolled over an already shivering Indicate. He tried to draw his sword as he came on, but it was frozen to the scabbard. Indicate skidded to a stop on icy stone as he arrived at the intersection. Another alley opened to the right. Connor was on the ground now, shivering and clutching at his stomach, groaning in agony, and the knight was no longer alone. Behind him, 2 other plate-armored men had emerged from the other alley. They struggled to draw their swords as well. Indicate had just spent the better part of 2 days practicing with this sort of problem. He crouched, bending his knees, and rapped the end of his scabbard sharply on the frozen cobbles, then pulled on his hilt again. The sword came free. The first knight raised his massive sword and stepped forward. Flakes of ice fell off him in a series of small cracks as he moved. His sword blade was black with frozen blood. "Get out of here, boy, unless you want to die for an old rummy." His voice sounded hollow as it reverberated behind the tiny holes of the vent tail on his closed helm. Giving the lie to this offer, the other 2 men moved to cut Indicate off. Shivering from the innovation, paying out a cost he had not calculated and could not have known, his heart pounding, Indicate looked down on the anguished face of his father and thought no thoughts but one. He felt no feeling but one. The knight reared back for a mighty 2-handed swing, but Indicate was faster. He had foreseen the gambit, though whether from instinct or an unconscious act of millisecond heraldry, he would never be able to say. With a howl of rage, he stepped in on the man and, with a speed that made the air whistle, twisted around and slashed his sword down upon the knight's gauntlet, shearing through all 4 fingers of his left hand and rebounding off the hilt. The digits exploded outward like beans off a drumhead, and the knight's sword flew out of his hands across the icy pavement. "Gah!" The knight clutched his ruined stumps. Urine steamed as it flowed down his frosted plate armor. Indicate roared again and swung his sword still more ferociously, speed making it sing until it hit the knight sideways through the lower half of his visor, denting it sharply into his mouth. Steaming gobs of blood spurted forth and the man fell backwards, twisting crazily. Indicate caught a quick glimpse of the sigil on his backplate, a longship. The implications were not lost on Indicate, but he had more pressing issues to consider. His sword had rebounded from the destroyed helm into a position approximating guard as he turned to face the other 2 knights. One had finally unsheathed his massive sword, but the other still struggled with his. Their body language was hesitant, their movements cautious and crabwise, startled blue eyes completely filling their tiny visors. "Sir Robert!" The voices of Lord Quincy Layton and Stephen Kenelm echoed down the alley as they rushed towards Indicate and his adversaries. The aggressors' visored heads pivoted to each other, and then they scrambled down the other alley, feet slipping on the ice, and were swallowed in darkness, only the clanging of armor marking their panicked retreat.